Check 1 2. Check 1 2. And final microphone check.
You will be in sunny Italy next. No, France.
France, southern France, yep. About 2 weeks.
I've been checking it's, my son's in Mexico, and it's in the 80s.
Okay.
Isn't that funny?
Yes. I would like to do that.
What do you get?
It says goodbye tension, hello tension.
Goodbye tension. I got all kinds of crazy gifts when I retired.
You all set?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Marie Claire Gorham,
Here.
John Krischer,
Here.
Susan Murphy,
Here.
Phil Pardue,
Here.
John Krischer.
Here.
Oh, Mary Jo Williams.
Here.
Sorry. We're all here. Thank you.
I figured it twice.
He's double here.
I'm double here, which is trouble. The Pledge of Allegiance, please.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there any public appearances? Anybody on Zoom or anybody here wishes to speak? Okay. Is there any announcements by any of the trustees? Okay. All right. Announcement of the library director.
I don't have any announcements at this time.
Okay. All right. So the approval of the minutes for February. Anybody have any changes or anything with them? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move we approve.
I second.
I move we approve the minutes. I never get this thing on.
I second.
Roll call, please.
Marie Claire Gorham,
Yes.
Susan Murphy,
Yes.
Phil Pardue,
Yes.
Mary Jo Williams,
Yes.
John Krischer.
Yes.
Approved. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to receive the librarian's report for February.
So the only note that I want to make, and I'll cover this when we talk about the last item on the agenda, which is the e-resources, just that our circulation overall, both hard copy, physical books, and electronic checkouts seems to be increasing, continuing to increase. The library is very popular these days, and we're getting back to those pre-pandemic numbers with the hard copy circulation. So good job to my team with ordering and getting books on the shelves, and I'm glad that the library is so well used and well loved. And great program attendance, too. Any questions for me about the report? It's, like I say, we just keep increasing.
All right. We'll move up to the next thing on the agenda is to receive a monthly report from the Master Plan Ad hoc Committee. On that, I think last week, we're pretty well, everybody's up to. Oh, Treasurer's report first? Wait a minute. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Give me a report. Treasurer's report first, right?
Thank you.
And the check, too. Checks.
Yes, checks and treasury report. What I wanted just to point out was that we approved some transfers of money in the January meeting, $4,300 from administration and $6,500 from IT, both moving that money for $10,800 to technical services. And this budget now reflects those changes, so they've been included. This is the first month that I remember that it looks like, if you scroll down to the end, that we look like we're over budget for the first time that I've been doing this report. But it's just a matter of timing. There were two factors. One is that we'll get the monthly or the quarterly distribution from the foundation next month, so the budget will be back. And there was no reported interest income. So Leslie ran a report for me because we've seen the interest income every month. It felt to me like every month they're like, wow, we're so far ahead. And this month it didn't change from last month, but we figured out it's reported quarterly. So I think we'll see both of those next month and we'll be back in the black. We're not in any trouble with the budget. So, but I just wanted to point it out. And otherwise, I don't think there's anything new or different to
I don't,
about it.
nope, I don't have any additions to make. We're,
Any questions or answer? Okay. Thank you.
Have a motion to approve the check register.
I move we approve the checklist, the check, whatever.
Check register, I second the
Thank
motion.
Have a second on that?
I second.
Yeah, built in.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Marie Claire Gorham,
Yes.
Susan Murphy,
Yes.
Phil Pardue,
Yes.
Mary Jo Williams,
Yes.
John Krischer.
Yes.
Approved, thank you.
All right, now we'll get back in order here. We'll receive the monthly report from the Master Plan Ad hoc Committee. I think, like I said earlier, we were pretty well briefed last week on what's going on with everything. Anybody have any other questions about our report last week? Anything else, clarification anybody would like to have?
Wasn't there a council meeting on the 26th?
there was a council
Yes.
meeting yesterday to talk about the capital improvement plan and to give the city council a second pass at that, more in depth for each of the projects. And they did at this point give a thumbs up, which is not the approved budget, but a thumbs up to carry over the library master plan project, alongside many, many other projects on the list for next year. So they'll be talking again about capital improvement in tandem with the budget numbers and how that pencils out. So there may be some changes to the capital improvement plan as we go forward through the spring, dependent on what our funding levels are at the city. And so we'll have a presentation to the city council next week on the master plan as they requested, the phase 1 of the master plan, which you all heard last week.
Okay.
Any questions from anybody on that? Okay. Moving right along very fast. Okay. We'll receive a report from the Carmel Public Library Foundation. Alex?
Good morning, Library Board Trustees. So yesterday, CPLF and Friends of the Library were honored by the County of Monterey Board Supervisors and other library regional support with a resolution for the National Library Week, April 4th through the 10th. So that was really, it was a lovely acknowledgement. I have the proclamation or the resolution to be framed for the library, the Friends, as well as CPLF. Last week, marked our community night with the library program's conclusion with a local history lecture. We had over 200 in attendance and another 150 online for the Kip Stewart program. And that program was produced really great collaboration, partnership with AIA, Monterey Bay, and CPLF. It marked the end of our theme-based series of programs about architecture, design, and a sense of place. And some of the programs over the course of the year, since that was the last one for this year, included the first poet laureate from Oakland, a neuroscientist, Dr. Michael Arbib, whose book, When Brains Meet Buildings, explored the cognitive process of how we relate to our built environment. We had our I.M. Pei biographer, who explored the iconic work of this legendary architect and his life. And so it was an exciting year. And then April 23rd, we have our annual library fundraiser, and that's the Human Edition with acclaimed historian Douglas Brinkley and best-selling author Dave Eggers, and we hope to see you all there. CPLF continues its work on the Centennial Restoration Renovation Project. We've engaged 2 incredible architect historians. This step has been really important because of the historic significance of the building and its prominent location in the heart of Carmel. Elizabeth Cannell is a graduate from Princeton University who received her master's degree in architecture from Harvard University. She worked with the Museum of Natural History in New York and with other national institutions and on several other restoration projects. The other person that we've engaged is Laura Hartman, and she was educated at Smith College, where she received a BA in art, and at the University of California at Berkeley, and she received a master's in architecture. She taught design and drawing in the architecture department at UC Berkeley and has taught at the University of Utah and Oregon. She's also an artist whose paintings and collages have received national and international recognition. She frequently serves on architectural design juries. She sat on the UC Berkeley Campus Design Review Board and is currently on the Sea Ranch Design Committee. So their expertise has been sought for this project and for the RFP to address the important historic and preservation aspects of the Harrison Memorial Library building. And both have commented on what a treasure we have in this historic landmark building, and we look forward to completing the RFP with the library soon. That's it. Do you have any questions or anything? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll move on now to a report on the e-resource usage.
All right. So as I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the librarian's report, our overall usage of the library is very robust in terms of increasing for hard copy materials. I anticipate probably by the end of next fiscal year we'll be at pre-pandemic hard copy circulation levels. The way that we're going, and it's building back up the adult audience there who are coming back into for programs, and we've got more families coming in. The e-resources, those are something we have been discussing as a group for a few years, especially with the acceleration of their usage, which alongside that has increased the cost to the library from that increased usage. So I put a couple of charts here in the staff report. One of the things I'll flip through as we go. Or I won't. Well, we'll be okay. It's the same charts, just bigger. So one of the things that I've struggled with e-resources and hard copy materials as we've had this conversation is to find some sort of mathematical formula, and I've also looked at other libraries to see if they found something that I haven't found, that compares in terms of cost per use, hard copy materials versus pay per use versus overdrive, which is license agreements for books, because these are all very different things. The factors I want everybody to keep in mind is, one, this first chart that's kind of a purplish color, and then the blue chart here, which talks about accessibility. One of the things that e-resources do for us is increases people's access to materials that we couldn't do. Even if we turned off all of the money for hard copy or for e-resource ordering and we flipped it over to hard copy, we still couldn't, we don't have the space, the physical space in our building to house all of those books, nor do I think it would be prudent because we would have such a high turnover rate for replacing items and repurchasing things that people put in for purchase suggestions because we weeded them out and we're doing that. So it really increases people's access to items that we wouldn't be able to provide access to, and in formats that we might not be able to provide access to them as well. And when we talk about accessibility, our online resources are available 24/7, so any time of the day or night. Our building isn't open every day, 24/7. They can be accessed from anywhere as long as you have a connection to the internet, whether that's Wi-Fi or mobile data. And it supports access for people who are visually impaired, who are hearing impaired, and also people who struggle with learning disorders such as dyslexia, because you can change the typeface, and you can't necessarily do that with hard copy books. And even with large print, there's a limited publication of those, and we don't have every book there, but with an e-reader, you can enlarge the text. So moving on to talking about costs. I do believe that we have reached a tipping point. We are definitely spending more when we look at the percentage of circulation versus the overall spending in the budget, and we're at about, I think our latest bill for Hoopla was about $5,000, which was shocking. Which I love that I love that we have this problem, which is that people are using our resources so much. But we're going to be overspending in that area much more than I anticipated when we had our budget adjustment conversation in January. I do think that we should still be making Hoopla and Canopy available, but I think it is time to have a discussion about the budget for e-resources, especially as I'm starting to work on the budget for fiscal year 24-25, so we can establish some sort of philosophy around this. For discussion, we can talk about just continuing to increase the e-resources budget by rebalancing the budget, or requesting additional funds from the foundation, or using reserves. Those are all options. Option 2 would be to reduce Hoopla and Canopy spending by instituting a monthly cap. Now that can be done both ways. I wouldn't change any way that we're doing Overdrive. We've stayed in line in budget with that. It operates more like a virtual library with the check-in, check-outs, but it's this on-demand service with Hoopla and Canopy where everything's available all the time. We could all be reading the same book, and all of our friends could be reading the same book, so it operates differently than Overdrive and the physical library does. Now, with monthly caps, what I mean by that is there's 2 ways to do that. One, we can institute a monthly cap on the number of items that people can check out every month. So right now we have Hoopla up at 16, and that was a pandemic level that I brought us to in March when we did the shutdown, and I haven't lowered us down since. Same with Canopy, we're at 12 per person per month. Most people don't reach that. There's a small minority of people that do hit all of those uses, but the average number of uses per month is 5. So in order to make some sort of difference in our budgeting overall, we'd probably need to lower it down below 5, somewhere in that range. We could experiment with dropping it down, any number of ways. The other way that we can institute a monthly cap for both of those is what we're willing to spend every month. So we can put a cap on it and say, we're allocating $3,000 to checkouts. And this is something that when we were getting started with Hoopla and with Canopy that we did. So back in 2015, 2016, when we were getting these things launched, we had a monthly cap on the spending because these were new services to us and we didn't know what would be happening with those. Now, when we institute a monthly cap, when we have reached that cap, there's no more checkouts for anybody else for the rest of the month. So if we hit that cap on the 10th, that means nobody can use Hoopla or Canopy for the rest of the month, not until it resets on the 1st. We can, of course, try a combination of these things where we lower the usage to 6 items per person and our cap is, $4,000 or $4,500 a month and see how that goes. I think we're going to need to do some testing as we try to bring these costs down. And then, of course, option 3 that we have is, considering not using Hoopla or Canopy at all. And I don't think that would be very popular with our patrons who are using this. And I did take a look with this cost chart, with Overdrive and Hoopla, or with Hoopla and Canopy, I can definitely see what our average spend per item is. With Overdrive, it's different because the license agreements vary. So it's either, as many checkouts as you can for 2 years, usually they're 2-year terms, or you get 24 checkouts for that 2-year term. So the cost differs depending on which one of those models that they are using, and I'm sure there's other different ones out there, but those are the 2 that are the most popular with the publishers. And then for hard copy materials, we might have a James Patterson book that goes out 100 times, and the book costs $20, and that's, however many cents by that point. But then we might have a very, well done, beautiful hard copy book that, about paintings in the Russian Revolution that somebody requested, and that goes out 3 times, and it costs us $50. So it's very variable across the physical materials to try to evaluate cost per use. I also looked at, when working on this staff report, how many unique users do we have? How many unique people come into the Harrison Library? And that's, just those individuals, because I know a lot of people come in multiple times, sometimes every day of the week that we're open, as compared with the users of Overdrive, Hoopla, and Canopy. And we are seeing more unique users come in the building than we are using those. So we have a core contingent of people that are using the Hoopla and Canopy. And our results aren't in yet for the survey. They've been trickling in slowly. The library use survey, from what I've seen preliminarily for the people that have taken our survey, about just over half of our people are hard copy only users, and maybe just over a third are hybrid users. And then we have a very, very small contingent of people, 2-3%, that are ebook users only. So all of this is very, very, very interesting, but I don't know if it helps us make decisions, but I wanted you to understand, kind of where my brain goes when I think about these, because it's more complicated, I think, than just, this is too expensive, shut it down. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And you guys can discuss and hopefully give me some direction as we go forward for the rest of this fiscal year. And then we can continue as the discussion as we plan for the budget for fiscal year 24-25.
So I'm just curious about other libraries. Do you have any idea how they manage this?
So they have monthly caps. So they've set monthly caps. And we just haven't done that. The ebook usage, my instinct said we were going to start to level off with those, and they were wrong. And we still continue to see increase in that area. So, I think it's time for a monthly cap.
So on the Hoopla for the books, it has 860,854. And that's, so half of our patrons are hard books only. A third are hybrid users. And so then what does that leave? About a third we're generating. That's a lot more books than the libraries let out for the whole year, right? Hard copy?
So with the books, that's the books that we have access to. We have access to 800. So all of this, I have these side by side. So the usage, Hoopla usage is next to that.
Okay.
And we do have a dollar amount cap on Hoopla, so.
I'm with you, okay.
Yeah.
I just misread it.
Nope, that's the number of items that we have available through each of these services, next to the amount that people has circulated this year, virtually circulated.
No, I think that the putting a monthly cap on is the right idea. I would not put on a dollar amount yet. I would just keep lowering the threshold until we got to a dollar amount we could go for the whole year. I think it sends a bad signal that, somebody who's maybe going for their first book for the month is going at the last week. And says, like, yeah, you can't get it. Everybody else has spent it ahead of you, and that's kind of a fairness issue. And then the super users will figure it out fairly quickly. I mean, human behavior, and they'll rip right through all their books early, check out multiple ones, and then they're not worried about the cap. So I think it's a fairness issue. Do a cap, and what's the average now? Is it 6 or 5 is the average?
5, just like 5.2 something. Yeah.
So say 4 and see where that gets us.
Yeah, I will work with Hoopla on that and with Canopy as well to drop our uses down.
And what about Overdrive? Or is Hoopla the one that's driving?
Overdrive, we're okay. We're not in danger of overspending, and we just process those more like we do hard copy requests. So we have our allocation, and I think because it operates a little bit, it operates more like the library, but we're seeing a different, more steady use, and it's been there the longest. So we have our hardcore Overdrive Libby users that I don't think have jumped over to Hoopla or Canopy for that matter. Overdrive doesn't have movies because it's just another app.
So what I find is it's the availability of titles that I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And Overdrive is more likely to have them than Hoopla is. So I don't know maybe it's just the genre thing I read or something like that. But I find that there's more opportunity on Overdrive to find the title, but with that wait list, you only sign up for maybe 2 or 3 books or whatever, and that gets passed around. That seems to be self-writing. It sounds like Hoopla doesn't.
So Hoopla, yeah, it doesn't have that wait list like we do for Overdrive, and we do try to keep with our Overdrive spending, just like we would with hard copy books. We purchase books through Overdrive Advantage, and those become available. So if there's a long wait list for, say To Kill a Mockingbird, and we purchase a copy of the book, and then our patrons, if they've been on the long wait list, they have first dibs on that. They get bumped to the top of the list for that. They might have to wait behind somebody else who's also a Harrison patron, but
Okay.
so that's one way we use those funds, is to keep an eye, just like we do with the physical books, on what the popular lists are, not only purchase suggestions coming in. And then the rest of the books, part of that, I think $2,500 that we pay as the fee for being a part of Overdrive, is that the consortium's constantly purchasing books. That's what that goes to support the building up of the library that everybody has access to.
For Overdrive.
For Overdrive, right. And then we can purchase books on top of that.
And the reason we wouldn't just pick one or the other is that Overdrive doesn't have films and Hoopla does have films.
Hoopla has films, music, TV, comics, audios. And audios, I will say, with Overdrive, with Hoopla, audios are 60% of what people are using. They're very popular. So ebooks comes in second, and then everything else is very minimal after that. But audios are a big chunk.
And when you say audios, those are podcasts, or are they
Books.
Songs?
People are listening to books.
Ebooks.
Okay. Yeah, they're listening to the ebooks.
My question is, on Canopy, is it just films?
It's just films.
If you're going to eliminate anything, I would assume that would be the one that you would eliminate, if you have to. Because, I don't know, somehow libraries and films, I mean, people can get their films if they need to on another service, if possible.
That is true. I will say that with the pandemic, we saw people swinging back to DVD use, such that we were almost going to, like right before the pandemic, eliminate the kids' DVD collection because it wasn't circulating. And then we had a whole bunch of people swing back, because part of the backlash to the streaming services is, we did this because cable bills were so much, and now there's 50 different things that I have to subscribe to, and it's just as much as it ever was. Can I have a DVD? But the challenge with DVDs in my Canopy is good, ostensibly like one of these streaming services, though, is that we can't get DVDs sometimes. Sometimes, a series, especially we have a lot of Anglophiles here, so Father Brown is on Canopy. Father Brown is on Canopy. We can't get the DVDs of them. It'll take us 2 years after a series comes out. They're not making them anymore, and they're not making them with the rapidity that they used to. And so that is challenging. Same with audios sometimes, large print and audios. They're just not issuing them in that format.
Right. And so if you were going to pick one to eliminate, you have, not that I'm advocating that, but just talking through the options, you have Overdrive, which does the books and the audio, and is very well represented. And then you have Canopy, which is films only. And then Hoopla is the one that kind of goes both ways.
It does.
And it's also more expensive than the Canopy.
It is.
And if you went with Canopy, would that satisfy most of the, you can't make everybody happy, but would you satisfy 80% of the people who look for the films? I mean, it's gonna be harder. The downside is that if you are looking for a book, you can find it on Hoopla or audio, you get it then, you don't have to wait.
Right.
So that's an instant gratification thing. But then on Canopy, on Overdrive, it's easier to control cost and provide a more library-like experience.
It is. So, and that's why I say all of this is complicated as we go through it. I think having both options are good. The being a part of the library consortium is great. We know, trying to articulate this well. I think at this point in time, this is part of a discussion, I think we've talked about this before, with our philosophy around e-resources, and it's something that we, as staff, have been talking about in terms of digital content. Because we have a collection development policy for hard copy materials and how we do that, but more libraries are starting to adopt these because we get Canopy or Hoopla or something new coming at us, and there will be something new. And we haven't even talked, and I didn't put this in the staff report simply because there's really no cost to us. But we also have the Palaces app from the state of California, and that was the measure, and different states have adopted this, for everybody to pool their ebooks together, to pull in everything that's in public domain. And also, so we have our Overdrive books that we purchased there represented, so does the consortium. And we can purchase books, including from Amazon, which you can't get anything from Amazon through Overdrive, and that's a lot of the audios are restricted because of that. Access to that is restricted. So it's an attempt by all the libraries to increase access for everybody across the board. And I think leveraging things like Palaces and doing a deep dive into that as we go through the future and finding ways to offset some of these costs will be good for us. We just haven't had the bandwidth so far to, I think, maximize its use. And again, so having we've got Palaces app, even more things from the state, and then Overdrive, which does the same thing as Palaces. We have a lot of things going on, and I think that this is, for our purposes today, putting a cap on is good direction for me, but we're going to need to talk about how many services do we want, what duplication of efforts are we seeing, who's doing what better, and how do we keep costs down. So when we talk about Canopy, we're like, well, Hoopla has movies too, and they also have Father Brown, so let's skip Canopy for now. And I'm using Father Brown as that example, but I think we're going to need to start to scale some of these things. Because having options is great, but also we want to minimize, to some extent, duplication of efforts and spending where we can. So.
It sounds like you've very much already considered the Occam's razor approach and like what's the simplest answer given the options, and that's brilliant. I'm also, just to your earlier point about talking about, okay, well, what represents a library? Is it film? That's not what I think of naturally. I do think it does still represent a form of cultural currency because a lot more content is becoming visual. And also, if you look at the future of a lot of authoritative content, it might still have like a video component and things. So we're, anticipating those trends, I think, by keeping your finger on the pulse. Thank you, Ashley.
I do personally have a problem, though, with putting a cap on this. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it or think about it, but it's a hard message, I think, to send that we as patrons have had access to all of these things, and now we're saying, well, no, you can't, or your access is going to be limited. Mm-hmm. And I wonder how many of those 12 people that average 12 uses a month are kids or teens, or, I know my granddaughter will read 2 or 3 Overdrive books a day. They're not waitlisted, right? But she loves to read, and that's how she reads. And so I have a concern about just understanding better who we would be possibly, curbing or restricting by putting the cap on. And who are those people between the 5 and 12? And are they the ones who need the access because they can't come to, I just have a concern about the message that we're sending by limiting it. And maybe it's better to think about increasing the budget and looking for all those areas of duplicity. So I don't know. I'm not trying to curb this conversation, but I just worry about how we're going to message this. Who's going to get the message? Who it's
Right.
It's often that you end up targeting a couple of people, and I don't know. But the message is to everybody, right? And
Right.
so I don't know. I'm not being very articulate, but I have some concerns about it.
Just to clarify, when we're talking about potentially putting a limit on the number, we're talking about Hoopla, not the Overdrive.
Not the Overdrive.
No, I understand that.
No, but
I'm
just-
saying that. I would just use that Overdrive as an example. There probably could be people who
Right.
do the same thing with Hoopla, right? Or they want to watch the whole series of Father Brown.
Right.
And if you tell them they can only watch 5 episodes a month, they're not going to be very happy with that. So,
Right.
I'm just concerned a little bit about it. How do we message this?
So, we can let the budget climb unrestricted. I mean,
Yeah.
that is certainly an option on ebooks, and this is something we've been talking about since 2017.
Yeah.
The problem is that we don't earn the money for the library, and the city doesn't pay the money for the library.
Right.
We depend on the foundation,
Right.
and so there may be a limit at some point where they say,
Right.
one, we don't agree, we can't raise that money, or we don't
Right.
think it's a good usage, and they're a foundation, they can say that.
Right.
And then there's other things that could happen. So I think that, those are all great points, but I'm not sure that an unconstrained budget or something saying, all right, at this point, we have a problem. We need to identify what that point is, whether it's not, or, now, or something like that. And it also fundamentally affects what we think that our library is going to look like into the future. Because as we shift to more and more electronic checkouts, if that's the way of the future, then we end up having, as we look at remodeling the library, are we going to go to more computer stations? Because, hey, these books can be read any place. So people are going to want to come into the library and read them in the library. So at that point, we're now saying, well, maybe we would need to cut down the amount of physical books that we have in the library so we can have more electronic here. So what are our metrics as we work through this problem?
Yeah.
There is no one right answer.
Right. I just say, but Ash is also saying, our
Yeah.
hardcover checkout or hard books is very robust. So I don't think it's either or, in my mind at least. So I don't know. I
think
It's
there's,
not until somebody comes in and says, I really prefer to, I'm dyslexic, I need to have a place to read my library book, and I need to have it a quiet place because I need to focus. These are all reasonable requests to make
Right.
as you go through. But then you have request after request after request, and at some point you go, so what are we doing best for our patrons as a whole going through, and what does that look like? I'd say that this is I've always wondered about, at what point does a library go from being paper to virtual? Is it cultural? Is it a generational? What does that look like going forward? And what do we owe it to our patrons to try to provide the best service, whatever that would be, and within the funds allowed.
and I think that when we talk about monthly caps, Mary Jo, one of the other tacks that we can take, especially for Hoopla, as that's our biggest spend at the moment, is 2 things. One, instead of, next month dropping it down to 4 uses, knowing that our average is 5, we can gradually pull it back and see what happens and experiment that way. So we drop it from 16 to 12, and then we drop it down to 10 and see what those impacts are. The other thing that we can do is, that number where it says Hoopla items, 860,000, we do have a cap on our Hoopla spending, And that is that each of the items that is checked out costs no more than $2.99 a use. We could go up to $3.99, we could go up to $4.99, but we capped it at $2.99. We can drop down to $1.99, which will reduce that access. So it will reduce that 860,000 items available. We could drop down to 99 cents. So that's another way that we can do it. It reduces the access, but it also is another measure to keep costs down. So we can decide this together as a group. I can play around with it with our Hoopla account manager to see, what that would look like, so that we can try to maintain maximum access while also keeping costs down.
Do you have the ability to look at the patron level? What I'm saying is that Mary Jo said, hey, look, I've got a small child
Right.
who loves to read. They read through these books. Those books are probably not that expensive. So they're probably in the $1.99 portion. So can you fine tune Hoopla to that extent?
To tell it to, if it's if we're
to understand better, I
So
think,
if it's,
who the patrons are.
yeah, it's so
12 years or under?
Yeah,
They,
so
they have unlimited, and then if they're over 12, or that's an arbitrary age, by the way.
Yes.
This is
No,
for simple
that's-
argument.
yeah, no,
And
that-
then above that, then the usage is,
this dollar amount below. I can find out about that. I'm not sure if it's across the board. I think it's across the board, but I'll look into that. And I can tell you that with our both Hoopla and Overdrive, and even Canopy to some extent, the uses that are of materials for children are very small compared to adult. It's not a lot of, we don't see a lot of kids stuff being watched on Canopy. And I don't have percentages off the top of my head, but I would say it's probably like 15% of what we do. It's not a huge contingent of kids that are using it. And we kind of talked about this a little bit last month when I was speaking about that American Library Association article, that more kids are wanting to use the physical space and the physical book. So there's always this kind of pendulum swing within the culture and within society where let's adopt all the e-stuff, everything's electronic, to actually we just want hard copy of this. So I think we're in that place right now.
so on early child development, is it better for them to listen to audiobooks or to read books?
I think it depends on the child
Okay.
and where
So
they are developmentally. So for instance, we have Wonder Books, and Wonder Books and those are picture books, they are chapter books, they're nonfiction books for kids, and they look exactly like physical books, but they get this little black triangle, and so they can also read the book for you. They can ask you comprehension questions, or it can be a sing-along. So there's all different formats to support kids cognitively as they're developing that we have. But I will tell you, and I saw this on the survey too, and we heard this a lot before the pandemic from parents, is when kids and families come in, they don't want to see the technology in the library. They're there to interact with other kids and other families. And with books. That's why they're there, and that's the reason why we pulled the AW stations out and we don't have the iPads in the lobby any longer.
Right. I was thinking of the context of the online books, for Hoopla and things like that.
Right.
How best to serve that segment. That's all.
Yeah.
Electronically, not the physical.
Right.
Phil, when you were talking about the library going more computer stations, our figures now show people are going back more to hard copy. So we're going the opposite way of this, what we're talking about. I mean, there's use here, but the hard copy seems to be really where it's at. So it's a juggling thing with finances. Hard copy is really still taking off.
Right, but
we have to kind of work. The money thing is, it's a real tough situation, because if we make, like your granddaughter, all these books, it's really tough. And what do we do? What do we really do? I mean, we could try a dollar amount. Maybe that sounds good, rather than putting a cap on it. And then the thing is, finances. Like I said, we rely on the foundation, and when times are good, there's donations. Times aren't good, donations don't come in as strong. So we have to really look at everything. And I just think right now, it's premature to say a library is going to change to a tech center. Maybe in Silicon Valley,
So,
maybe differently,
But
but
I,
in here.
no, and to Phil's point, I think we have to be prepared to adapt and to meet our community's needs. And when you look at the librarian's report, you know, we're almost half and half with usage. So while we know that we're recovering from the pandemic and people want hard copy books, and that's what we're seeing in terms of trends in articles and magazines, you can't ignore 51,450
No.
checkouts
Right.
using Overdrive, Hoopla, Canopy, Flipster magazines, you know, all of those things. And so we have to keep that in mind as we, again, plan for the budget, but also library services into the future.
it's also a rate of change. You know, if you look at the adult circulation for the year to date, the change is 12.73%. Electronic checkouts is 26.8%. So it's
Right.
increasing at twice the rate.
Yeah.
When we first started this, talking about this in 2017, the electronic checkouts were a fraction of the
Yeah.
hard copy.
And I'm sorry
We're
that-
talking about a project where, you know, we're going to renovate or upgrade the library, the master plan. It's something for the next 20 or 30 years. And in 7 years, we've almost caught up with the electronic checkouts. And so I fully get your point, and I understand, and that the hard copy is very important to our patrons. But we're seeing a huge rate of change.
no.
Where electronic, and when the electronic checkout becomes bigger than the hard copy, there will likely be pressure to, if there's a shortage of funds, there'll be a likely pressure to provide more electronic than hard copy.
Right, and it's, you know, this is, I think, par for the course for libraries in general. Before we had electronic resources, it was the battle for, I've seen the library board notes about purchasing VHSs. Should we be purchasing VHSs at all and circulating those? And if so, we should only be circulating things like the Criterion Collection. Or, you know, we've had different groups that, you know, I know some of our patrons, well-loved patrons, who love their mystery novels, and, you know, their strong belief is that everybody in town only reads mysteries, and we should put all of our money into mysteries, forget everything else. So there's always going to be a tug of war and a back and forth where we rebalance collections and when new things come up in the future. But we want to make sure that we're responsive to changes and that we are nimble enough to adapt in the future with all of these options that we have as libraries. And it's great that we have so many different options for providing access and resource to our patrons, but we need to make sure that we're monitoring them and we're just subscribing to anything and everything, but that we're thoughtfully putting these out for our patrons so that they have the best access possible, you know, for the greatest number of people and who wants them and needs them.
Right. But the question for today is that we're
We're
going to bust the budget on electronic checkouts.
We are, and so
do we want to approach the foundation for a plus-up? Do we want to move funds around? Do we want to try putting a limit on the number of checkouts? I mean, that's really...
That's where we are
That's not
at,
on the
yes.
agenda, I guess, to make a decision today, but that's the decision that we're going to have to make.
Yeah,
Yes, when we spoke about this we spoke about the budget adjustments in January. I thought that we would be okay to absorb any overage with interest income and some underspending in the budget, but I don't think that will be the case at the rate we're going. So I think that for this fiscal year, either we ask for additional funds or moved funds from reserves, or we start the caps now rather than in the next fiscal year.
That's a tough decision. On your point.
And we can hit pause on that because this is a big discussion and come back with more information on what I think the dropping Hoopla specifically down to $199 a month, what that would look like for collections, and if there is a way to make sure that certain collections, like for youth, are still open and available and at their maximum access, and come back to all of you next month with what those figures would look like for us going forward.
Okay.
Yes?
I don't know if we should really kick the can down the road that much farther. I mean, maybe take a month, but come up with some kind of a decision. Because our demographics are changing the town itself, so there probably will be, the way it's changing, more electronic checkouts. So do we have to make some hard decisions?
Right, so so we need to make the hard decisions. I think that I don't think that we can make them now unless it's on the agenda, because we have to.
You can provide me with direction, and that direction could be, I want you to put a cap on, or I want you to pull money from reserves, or I want you to cut it off completely, or I want you to leave it alone for right now. Or you can direct me, as I just said, to come back with some more information from Hoopla about what a 199 cap would look like, and do some cost modeling with them specifically, because that's the biggest overage that we're going to have is Hoopla specifically, for the next month. So that would mean we wouldn't make any changes until the month of May.
So if we wait till the month of May and the budget year ends in June, does the problem just get worse?
Yes, it will get worse.
And so will it get to the point where within the next month that our choices are to, instead of 4, it'll be you get 2, or we need to cut it back to $1 instead of $1.99?
Right, or we need supplemental funds.
Yeah. So, how about, we're only a couple more months left in this budget. Do we take money out of reserve to cover how much we need right now?
And we
Come up
could,
with a plan for the next fiscal year. If we figure we need more money, we could go to the foundation, ask for a supplement for next year to cover extra ebook cost. Or do we go to a fact, we cut back on the usage and keep our money we get, the foundation gives us, which they're on a set amount of money too. So to keep going back every year and asking for more money, where do we set with this? I think we have to kind of come up with some kind of an idea how we want to do this. Next year, we could maybe supplemental to get us through this year and give us a couple of months to play with how we want to work it out. How we want to maybe put a cap, go to the foundation for more money. It's going to take more than a couple of weeks to months to figure this out. We have till June to come up with the new budget. But I don't mind taking, it's how much money would it be out of reserves?
Right now, we're about $5,000 over for the month in e-materials.
So it could be
right.
$10,000 or something like that?
I think we're going to
It'd be
be,
more like 20.
20,
it would be more
okay.
like 20 by the end of the
That's
fiscal
a
year.
big, because you have to go, we'll have to figure something out, because you might have to go to the foundation and ask for next year, you might need a $30,000-$40,000 increase.
Well, it depends on you're right,
Yeah.
but it depends on what decision you make.
Yeah.
And this has always been the philosophical discussion, is the library, the physical library itself with the books, the central part of the library that we want to protect for our patrons, that we think provide the best service for our patrons. If it is, you wait toward things and programs that get them in while providing services to people who, the early reading education people with dyslexia, the special needs. What you're not doing is you're not servicing somebody like me who can go through a book a day if they want to.
Yeah.
We'll just sit down there and read it. And so that's why I get Amazon Unlimited, to read the books, because it's not fair to the patrons for me just to read through all these books as they go. And so to answer that question, that it's the fundamental thing is that who do we want to service? And what do we think is important to our patrons and to the city of Carmel going forward? And once you figure that out, then it becomes easier to say, all right, it's going to be the physical books. Therefore, we like Overdrive, because Overdrive is more like a library. It's an extension of the library that runs just like a library, and we can control it just like a library as it goes through. Because we do control by in that the librarians curate the selections in there. They curate the selections that are on the Overdrive. You can go to Canopy for the films if you want to read all the films. And then we're going to sculpt the hoopla so that it services a unique population that is serviced neither by Overdrive or Canopy. And then we look at Palaces to see if Palaces works. It's like, what can we move out if we need to?
Right.
I mean, likely, well, because you don't have unlimited budgets as you go through. So those are the type of things we need to work through before we go and we say, all right, yeah, we need to run through our reserve. We need to ask the foundation for more money. We need to actually have a plan on what we think the library should look like, and not something. And I think we've talked about it a lot. And so what is that in their interim? Understanding it'll change as it goes forward. I mean, it's not locked in stone, but as we make these budget decisions, what is the construct we're making those around? What is important in the library? How do we best service the patrons that have a need for the use of the library and the enjoyment?
I like what you just said, particularly about curating hoopla and really thinking through what's available to everybody. But I agree with John, that's going to take a little time. But I like it much better than just saying, let's put a cap of 4 checkouts, or let's set or even reducing it to $1.99, because my brain starts thinking about, well, then what books won't be available, right? Because they won't. So there are so many different ways to get to where we want to go. And that's why I think I like what John is saying. $20,000, it's significant. We're lucky this year because we've had so much interest income that we didn't expect.
Yes.
We might end up being pretty darn close to squeaking through this budget year, but I think a really thoughtful decisions about next year's budget around this is important, but to really think through, and maybe it's another ad hoc group that we just start looking at, how do we want to handle this idea of e-resources and come up with some fairly detailed alternatives. One of which might be, asking for more money or not, because we can manage it if we start thinking about it in this way.
So I think that's great. We've been thoughtful for 7 years. We have 2 months. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, because we can cover it, but we have been talking about this for 7 years. And we've turned over every board member here in those 7 years, and we have never really come up to. We've been very fortunate. We've been able to work this through the budget caps. We've been able to work through a pandemic, and it's been a masterful job of keeping all the balls in the air and keeping it going. But we're running out of time. We're running out of reserves. We're running out of ways to move the money around, and so. Now is the time to start addressing the problem, the issue and giving the community a chance to respond.
I like your ideas. I think maybe two committee members get together and try to work out a system, come up with some ideas on this, because we have till, if we pull the money out of reserves, we have till June, or probably June to come up with a budget.
So
you have till May.
So for this,
we're very close. We are very close.
Right. So for this fiscal year budget, we're down to the wire. Either we try to not go over budget by instituting some sort of cap measure for the rest of the fiscal year for April, May, and June, while we talk about what fiscal year 24-25 looks like with regards to budget for ebooks for that year. So there's 2 things happening right now. One is, do we feel confident that the interest income and some of the slight underspending in other budget areas will cover the overage? And if I don't think it will be $20,000, but will probably be over budget for the first time in ever. That could be absorbed by reserves. So what direction would the board like to go in for April, May, and June, which is start caps now, or gamble that we won't be that much over budget and that we can pull money from reserves to cover any overage? Because we're consistently, Phil will know this, we're consistently under budget to the point where we put a policy in place to say that we want to kind of push us to spend that money before the end of the fiscal year.
For about 4 years in a row, we chose to not take as much for our final disbursement from the foundation.
During the pandemic
Yeah, we
years,
did.
yes.
Because, and then before that, we were still under
We were under consistently about $15,000 to $20,000
every year, and now
every
we're,
year.
so we've seen a $40,000 shift.
Yeah, we have,
We can't do
That's-
a cap for 3 months, could we?
We can turn caps
That's a
on and off.
possibility.
Yes.
Also to do a cap until the new budget kicks in, depending on, I don't know how.
Right, so that's the
that would
question now
happen.
is-
That's
is-
another
do we
possibility.
have to notify the users? I mean, just come up with, we have a meeting today and say, oh, by the way, starting the 1st of April, you can only check out, there's a cap now.
I would start off with dropping the dollar amount down to $1.99.
Yeah.
I wouldn't restrict that until we have more discussion for the next fiscal year for hoopla. So
How-
the two options are gamble with the overspending, that we're going to be really close at the end of the fiscal year based on previous years of underspending and the interest income, or institute a hoopla cap starting now at $1.99 per item to kind of curb some of that overspending for April, May, and June of this fiscal year. Those are the two.
It's tough because interest rates are not going to stay like they are now, so we're going to get less interest next year. So I would like to have, for me, how much, or averaging out how much more we're going to need next year budget for these e-resources. That's going to give us a good idea how much over we're going to be. Is it going to cost $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 more for e-resources? And then we can talk to the foundation, see how they feel about it on that aspects.
Well,
Or-
that will be part of our budget discussion for fiscal year '25 when Mary Jo and I sit down and go
Yeah,
over so I have a model going right now for what at our current spending rate, how much will it cost us to do ebooks for next fiscal year? And it's a lot.
Yeah, so,
And then we need to build that model in for knowing that, one, is this too much money? Are we uncomfortable with this dollar amount? Is it going to push us over in other areas or squeeze other areas out? Or two, do we need to start reducing the amount that we allocate to e-resources? But that will be a future discussion when we get to late April and May and even into June if we need to keep talking about it. But for the present, for right now, and the question of the staff report is, for the rest of this fiscal year, what is the direction? Again, gamble that we're going to be really close and maybe a little over and just let it go, or start the $1.99 cap, which is the best option that will restrict the least amount in terms of uses for people for April, May, and June of this fiscal year to try to curb some of that.
how long would it take to get the results off of this? And then if we drop it to $1.99, at the end of the month, we'd have some figures how much it costs cut our cost by doing that. That's my question right now. Could we drop it to $1.99 and still be $5,000 over budget? We don't really know that right now. I don't think.
My
Well,
vote
we
is
know
to
that go to
gamble.
$1.99, you'll reduce the prices by a third,
Yeah,
put to your cost on. Because, the hoopla is $2.17 per
Right.
checkout now, you drop it to $1.99, that's a little bit over a third of a drop. So it's whatever you're gonna spend, you're gonna be at 2/3 of that.
Right.
people might not check out as much because the selection might not be there.
Right, and so then it gives you time to
Yeah.
figure it out without putting the cap on. So the people who, the $1.99, it works for them and they're just checking things out, that's great. And if it's between the $1.99 and the well, that's the average. So, that means some people are checking out.
It's not, everything isn't costing us $2.99, otherwise the average would be $2.99. It's everything $2.99 and below. That's why the average is lower. So this would be a combination of things that cost $1.99 or 99 cents. So it would be lower than that per use, likely based on the usage.
Well, I think it's something we're really gonna have to make a decision on. How's the rest of the board feels? How would you?
Yeah, for the rest of the
Phil,
fiscal year.
How would you like to attack it? Would you like to leave it the way it is and draw out of reserves and gamble it's not gonna be that much? Or do you want to it's up, I think, for us to make a decision, give her some direction on what we wanna do. We have different choices. We have to make some kind of a decision by May so we know to go for the budget. We're kind of lucky we have, the foundation can help us. But
And we
if
have
we were
the
the city,
buffer.
we'd be a little bit rougher trying to get money. The way the city is right now to draw money out of the city, we'd have an awful lot harder decisions to make. Hopefully, the foundation could help us out with a little more money next year, looking things over, but
See, I'd be.
how do you
sorry.
want to do this? I mean, as a group, get your thoughts. Do you want to pull out of reserves, or do you want to put a cap? What do you think is the best way to do right now?
I'd like to put a cap for 3 months
Okay.
and see what happens,
Mhm.
if that works.
And I would be inclined to do the cap now,
Okay.
just to be proactive about trying to get the budget, and then
Okay.
we can work and see what our options are.
Yeah, sure.
And if we can raise the limit back up, we can raise the limit back up. And then we can find out how it impacts people.
Yeah.
That would be my inclination.
Establish example.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you feel the same way?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm the outlier, but that's
No, I
okay.
think that's great.
I would rather keep things as they are and understand better what that cap
Yeah.
actually means and understand what our options are.
Yeah.
Because I just don't know. But, we're
Right.
still throwing out ideas about how to handle this without a lot of information behind them. To understand, is it better to put a cap on the numbers of checkouts versus lowering the price? I mean, there's so many variables that, to me, it feels a little, making a decision without a lot of information.
Well-
However,
I
I
think,
can understand that
I
too.
think your ideas, but we're only doing it for a month.
Yeah.
So we'll figure
3
out a
months.
month. If it's, we can come back and
That's fine.
readdress this later. It's not, we're not saying right now that it's gonna be a $9.99
Right.
forever. This is 1 month. We'll see what it does to us.
And that will help provide us with
Give us some
information
guidance.
too
So we
as
have
we
to
go
give some,
forward.
Yeah.
When it comes to the budget, it's tough. I remember not that long ago, we were talking about, like you said, Phil, giving money, not taking the last check from the foundation.
Which we've done.
Now we've
Right.
come in, but I keep saying the demographics of the town has changed so much in the since the pandemic. A whole different, it's changed. So different, we have to adapt and figure out how we're gonna adapt. So it's our decision. I think we've kind of left you.
It sounds like
we'll put
we're
a
going to
cap
start
on
the
it,
cap on,
and then
then
we'll see how that goes, and then have discussions with the foundation. We can get some figures on what we need and how they feel. The foundation may feel they want to give us extra money for ebooks. I mean, that's a decision that would come to them.
Right, well, so
Have something to say, Alex? Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, you do. And yeah, I'll work very closely with Mary Jo on this as part of our budget process, because the rest of the budget is, pretty status quo for operations and things like that, but this will be a big piece of what we need to work out. And
Alex?
I was going to wait to the end there for you, Alex. Go right ahead. Okay.
Ashley and I have a meeting later this afternoon, and I'd like to talk further about it, if that's okay,
Yes.
before anything is decided. This is what I'm hearing, and I just want to, I'm listening to all the comments to what the immediate situation is and what the larger philosophical questions are. And I'm listening to all those relative to our pending centennial restoration renovation, which will again change the landscape of what libraries look like and what they're going to mean. It's a quandary because we as a library are driven by demand of our community, and we want to meet those demands, but at the same time we have to drive that as well, what that future is for the library, or what. So I think discussing what is at hand now, we can discuss, and obviously you are discussing it now, and I'm sure that can be worked out either with whatever you decide and what we decide together. But I think that Phil's philosophical questions, who do we want to serve, who and how we want to serve. We need a plan for what the library should look like. These are his words, which I really resonate with. And what is the construct for the library? And so when we're thinking about next year's budget, and yes, there is a spending policy that the Library Foundation is, adheres to, But I think that those types of questions, and then when we think about all of the aspects of what that restoration renovation looks like, and we think about having a library consultant talk to us about other trends, other libraries, like what you mentioned. I just think there are some larger questions to address, and I think that should be the basis kind of for the budget. I mean, that's what I think about for our budget, and I'm doing that now. So anyway, that's just what I wanted to add, was that there is, I get it, that there's an immediate need and concern and challenge and something that can be addressed. But the larger questions that you refer to, the philosophical questions, they will affect budget and everything else and how we meet the needs. Anyway, that's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think as we take in our survey results and start our strategic planning, this will be a core component of this, as we go forward.
As we navigate this, I think that the one thing we should do is try to stay within the allocated budget.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, make a decision that we're going to do something else and we're going to allocate the funds, and the funds get moved within the ones that we control, within our reserves and things like that. But I think we need to be proactive about it, and because we can always go back and change. But I think we have a duty to make sure that the library operations stay within the allotted budget, and that we go from there. And that's why I think that we need to take action now and then figure it out as we go. I mean, having this discussion in May of last year would have been brilliant. I mean, we would have all looked brilliant because we would have figured it out and we would have known and we would have done it. But I think at this late date, with 3 months left, which means there's no recovery time. I mean, if you overspend, you don't have months to fix it.
Right.
You're done with the fiscal year that we need to take action now to stay within budget, and then to if we found that we've overcorrected this fiscal year, then we can ratchet out. And then for the next fiscal year, we go and we figure out what we really think it should look like, and then do what we need to do, which would be to brief the foundation. I think that in the past, we haven't had this. So we've always just given money back at the end of the year to the foundation so it could be invested and we could be used later. As we push up to it, do we have a obligation as we change these policies to brief the foundation, since they provide the funding?
Right. So I agree with you, Phil. As the director, I want to stay within the budget that we have, either through using budget adjustments to recalibrate the budget as we go along and realign our spending. And in my mind, reserves are to be used for, special projects that come up that are of some sort of critical nature. It's not just us going, oh, we feel like doing this project this year and we didn't put it in the budget. Let's use reserves, or let's ask the foundation for money for this type of thing. I want to stay within budget. I think that's really important. And this discussion is important. I think putting this cap on will give us some good information for the budget for the next fiscal year as we work through those, and understanding what the tweaks that we make behind the scenes with our e-resources mean in terms of access, and also for us financially, so that we don't have such a variable going forward with the e-resources. That's the biggest variable in our budget right now, and has been.
I also, when you put a cap on taking out things, you might explain with the cap how much that it affects our budget. We might get some donations as a result of that from people who want to maybe check out more and can afford to pay a little extra. So by putting, when you do the cap, by explaining why we have to have a cap, that might help our budget to some extent. I don't know.
It could in the future, but I think we'll put this in place for April, May, and June, gather more information to inform fiscal year 24-25 with the goal of staying within our budget for the next fiscal year as it stands. And every year, usually in May, when we have a solid draft or early June, I do work with the foundation to submit that ask to them. So they're aware of the funds that we're asking for, why we're asking for them. And they don't get into the nitty gritty on our line items, but so that they have a heads up for planning for their fiscal year, because they're doing the exact same process right now concurrent with us. So there's no surprises for them. You know, we want $100 million. That would be great. We don't buy all the books.
So just looking through your notes on this section, we've been talking about the 20,000 for Hoopla, but there's also the 7,500 for Canopy. So it's really not, we're not talking about 20,000, we're talking about a 27,500
right, yes, we are.
500 to, that we're gonna have to navigate our way through.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are.
Was that about 10% of our budget?
Yeah, I think it's
Less
interesting
than that.
times.
Less than that.
Yeah.
So I think the direction I hear from everybody is we're going to put a dollar cap for the first month and see where it brings us. Phil, you made a good point that we were all appointed to be fiscally responsible for the library and to make sure that the budget was adhered to. So I think, I understand your point. It's a very good point. I think something we should follow. And we could address this again in probably would be May till we have the really numbers for the, how much it cut back things. You're not gonna know by the April meeting. It'll be May meeting till we really know how much cost we saved.
I can do some preliminary numbers, though, when we have
Okay.
April to look at what the spending is, because I can run reports from, custom dates within a time range, so I can figure out for April, for the first 2 weeks of April, what did that look like versus the first 2 weeks of March. So we can compare and contrast as we start the budget conversations, because I think the earlier the better for fiscal year 24-25 discussions. And I'd like to have a draft before you at that point, so we can continue this.
Well, how do you want to approach, do you want to have discussion? Do you want to put a committee to look into the e-resources cost? Two people just look into it and give ideas to bring back, report to us?
Right, I think there should be an ad hoc committee
Yeah, I was
for this.
kind of thinking maybe Mary Jo and Mary Claire could
Sure.
work together. She has children and grandchildren, so we give a whole new aspect.
Future of the.
We give an aspect compared to an older fellow, you had more kids using things.
Yeah.
I'm the one that still checks out the things you listen to and walking on my walk, so I'm not books, hard copies and that, so you're more attuned to these things. And come back maybe in May with some kind of ideas of what you think we should do
Sounds good.
with the public.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. I mean,
It need to be in May if we want to impact the budget for the next year. It
yeah,
needs to be in
next
May.
year, I
Right,
mean, you can
absolutely.
even ask around a little bit and get some opinions from people, what they think, who's checking the books out, and find out what's going on. We have to have some direction to make this work. And it's interesting times, is all I have to say about it.
And would it be possible, and this is to the library directors, the ad hoc committee works through and comes up with recommendations. Can we get by May, get those costed out so we know how those impact
Yeah.
the budget? And if we need to up the budget, how much that would be and what the justification would be?
Absolutely. I would say that, barring scheduling conflicts, we could probably have something for April, the April meeting. Mm-hmm.
Right, well,
Right.
if it's April, that's great.
Yeah.
But it's better to be, if you have till May, it's better to be good than fast.
Yes.
I'd rather have it in May because I'd like to give you, these things aren't simple.
Right.
So you need more than, we're talking, 26, 27 days. If we go to the end of May, you have 50, 60 days to really come up with something. Because they're scheduling, how you can schedule your time together to talk and come up with everything. So don't cut it too short, because we're talking for a whole year. This is going to impact all next year, so we have to come up with the right decision to serve everybody.
Sounds good.
Everybody with that? So then we've made this, I guess we say to you, Ashley, is cut back to thing, and then we'll form the committee, and in May come back with the report, and then we'll be able to, as a group, address the budget for 24, 25, and find out what we have to, if we have to ask for more money, where we set on that.
Very good.
Could I just, would it be good when we do that to have, what it would look like if we need to stay within budget? What it would look like if you could ask for anything? And then what would be the middle option in between? So that's, rather than a single point, these things usually go better if there's something to discuss.
Sounds good. Thank you all very much.
All right, is there anything else that people want to discuss today? Or anything future? I think we've went over an awful lot today.
I think we have some ideas of what we'll be talking about in the future, too.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think we have a lot going on right now. Thank you for all your input. Thank you very much. We've accomplished an awful lot here today. Thank you. I guess meeting adjourned.
So this was the longest meeting